Name change, by the way, happened at an altar. It was all about transformation. You can read about that in Genesis 35. Now listen to this. He built the stones into the altar in honor of God. Then Elijah dug a fairly wide trench around the altar. He laid firewood on the altar, cut up the ox, put it on the wood, and said, "Fill 4 buckets with water and drench both the ox and the firewood." Then he said, "Do it again," and they did it again. Then he said, "Do it a 3rd time," and they did it a 3rd time. The altar was drenched, and the trench was filled with water. Verse 36. When it was time for the sacrifice to be offered, Elijah the prophet came up and prayed, "O God, God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, make it known right now that you are God in Israel, that I am your servant, and that I'm doing what I'm doing under your orders. Answer me, God. Oh, answer me and reveal to this people that you are God, the true God, and that you are giving these people another chance at repentance." Immediately the fire of God fell and burned up the offering, the wood, the stones, the dirt, and even the water in the trench. All the people saw it happen and fell on their faces in awed worship, exclaiming, "God is the true God. God is the true God." Amen. Now, this is a very exciting story, and I could probably preach from this story the rest of my life. But here's what I want us to get from it this morning. Please get this. Because Elijah reconstructed the altar of God, he experienced the presence of God, and he provoked a miracle from God, and he restored Israel back to their right relationship and right fellowship with God. You see, the pivotal point in this story really isn't about the fire falling. It's about the altar being restored. Think about this. If the altar of God had not been restored, the miracle of God from God would not have been realized. Think about that. Here's Elijah on Mount Carmel, and he's in the middle of a drought, in the middle of 450 false prophets of Baal, in the middle of spiritual chaos, and so he does the most important thing that he can do. He reconstructs the altar of God. My friend, if you are in the middle of spiritual chaos today, the best thing you can do for yourself is to reconstruct the altars of God in your life. Go back to that place where things fell apart spiritually, and with God's help, fix it. You see, Elijah's act of reconstructing the altar becomes the catalyst for a brand new spiritual line to be drawn in the lives of the children of Israel. And the result is, once the altar of God was built, the fire fell from heaven, and the children of Israel met God, and they knew him by experience as the God who answered by fire. And that's what happens in our life when we can reconstruct the altars in our life. We come to know God by experience, personal experience. Now, some of you might hear that and say, "Well, so what?" So let me unpack this just a little bit further. Here's the so what for this story. Watch this. The altar of God lay in ruins, but Elijah knew that he had to reconstruct the altar of God before the fire of God fell. And here's why. Don't miss this. Only, that's the most important word in this sentence, only an up-to-date altar results in an up-to-date experience with God. Only an up-to-date altar results in an up-to-date experience with God. That's the big so what. You know, only a now altar produces a now experience with God. Only a present altar results in a present spiritual life. Only a current altar produces a current testimony. Church, hear me. God doesn't want us living on past altars. God wants us to build up-to-date altars with him and for him so that our spiritual lives can be up-to-date. That's the so what about the altar, and that's the so what about this message. Church, hear me. Our Christian life should be far more about today and tomorrow than about yesterday. Yesterday, it's gone. Our Christian life should be far more about now and tomorrow than about yesterday. The action point for us in this message, here's the big, big question. In what condition are the altars in your life? In what condition are the altars in your life? Are you living up to the promises that you made to God at those altars? Or are they just a distant memory in your mind? Can you point to some of the altars in your life that are vivid and are making a difference in your life today? Or are they just a vague memory somewhere in your past? When you think about the excitement in your spiritual life, do you refer to back when? Or do you refer to an up-to-date altar? What God is doing in your life right now? Is your experience with God up to date? Are the altars in your life, or would they be more like, well, Harv, I know that God's worked in my life in the past because, a long time ago He saved my marriage, or a long time ago He healed one of my, children, or, He fixed our finances way back then, or He provided a job for me when I prayed so hard that, that was a couple years ago, or He saved one of my kids, but yeah, that was really a long time ago too. If you were honest, would you have to admit that it's been a while since you've had a spiritual line drawn in your life? If you were honest, would you have to admit that some of the spiritual lines that have been drawn in the past have become somewhat fuzzy, and you've grown just a little cold in your spiritual walk with God? You've become disconnected to that spiritual experience that at one time was like the greatest thing in your life? Today, if you were honest, would you say, Harv, I really don't have any up-to-date altars in my present spiritual life? If that's where you are today, if that's honestly where you are, then first of all, I want you to know this. God's not mad at you. God's not even disappointed with you. In fact, I would say to you that God is reaching out to you with more passion and more desire and more longing than He ever has before. If that's where you are in your life right now, then I want to invite you as we close this service to just build an altar to God right where you are. In fact, I don't want anyone to come to the altar this morning. I just want to invite you right where you sit to just take the next few minutes and talk to God. God longs to meet with us. God longs to make memories with us. God loves to just hang out with us. He really does. And get this, get a picture of this. And the altar isn't peculiar. The altar is just a tool in which He uses to connect with us. So let's just take the next few minutes and spend some time with Him. Maybe this morning you need to reconstruct an altar in your life. Maybe this morning you would like to build a brand new altar to God. You just need a new touch from God. So as we close, let's just take some time to do that. And as the music starts very softly, you can just kind of fade that in. Let me just wrap up, encapsulate here the sermon one more time. Get this deep into your heart. The altar is a place, time, or occasion where a spiritual line is drawn in our life. And the reason we need to be aware of the altars in our life is because our tendency over time is to let our spiritual experiences grow cold. That's why we need to reconstruct the altars in our life. Because, my friend, only an up-to-date altar results in an up-to-date experience with God. Let's bow our heads. I'm not going to pray for the next just 2 or 3 minutes. We're not going to stay long. I want you to pray. I want you to talk to God. This message this morning is applicable for every single person in this building right now. So let's take some time and let's talk to God.